My brother took the keys to my new condo on my second morning there. He did not ask, he did not explain. He picked them up from the little blue bowl beside my front door, turned the key ring in his hand like he was testing its weight, then slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket as if my home had already become his decision. My name is Marin Whitlock. I was 42 years old then, and I had buried both of my parents within 9 months. I had spent 16 months caring for my mother in the old house on Maple Hollow Drive in Raleigh, measuring my life in medication schedules, hospice calls, insurance forms, and cups of soup she could barely finish. After she died, I sold that house and bought a small one-bedroom condo at Carolina Beach, 705 square feet, nothing extravagant, just one quiet room in the world where nobody needed me to be strong before breakfast. But Graham did not see peace when he walked in. He saw property. And by the time he left with my keys, I understood something I should have understood much earlier. Some people do not show up when you are breaking. They show up when they think there is something left to take. That morning had started so quietly that I almost resented it later. I had made coffee in a half-unpacked kitchen and carried the mug out to the balcony. A few cardboard boxes still sat against the living room wall. Mom's old reading chair was by the window, angled toward the light. Dad's cedar lockbox was still in the closet. I had not opened it yet. I told myself I was waiting for the right time, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid of what it would feel like to touch the last things he had chosen to leave behind. My keys were in that small blue ceramic bowl by the door. I remember it clearly because I had placed them there the night before and thought, this is mine now. At 9:17 that morning, someone knocked. I opened the door expecting maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from the HOA. Instead, Graham stood there with Paige. Graham Whitlock was 46, 4 years older than me, though he had been my brother since he was 9 and our parents adopted him. He had a way of entering rooms like he had already decided where everyone should stand. Paige followed behind him, neat hair, pale cardigan, face arranged into concern. They had used the visitor code I gave Graham 2 weeks earlier for emergencies, not for surprise visits, not for walking into my new home before I had even finished unpacking. Graham stepped past me before I invited him in. Paige came in after him and closed the door. Then she turned the deadbolt. It was a small sound, that lock sliding into place, but my stomach tightened around it. Graham looked around my condo slowly, not like a brother seeing where his sister lived, like a man estimating square footage. Paige touched my arm. "Marin, we are really worried about you." I pulled my robe tighter. Worried about what? Graham's eyes landed on the keys in the bowl. "I do not think you should be here alone," he said. He picked up the keyring. For 1 second, I thought he was going to hand it to me. Instead, he turned it over in his palm, opened his jacket, and slipped it into the inside pocket. I watched his hand zip the pocket closed. "This is too much responsibility for someone who just lost both parents," he said. "Paige and I can help you find a temporary place for a few weeks, just until things feel steadier." Paige nodded, soft and sad. "Grief can make people move too fast. A beach condo is a lot, Marin. Reed can just look at the market, nothing final. We should know our options." Reed Mercer was Paige's brother, a real estate agent at Mercer Shoreline Realty. I had never asked Reed to look at anything. I looked at Paige's phone when it lit up on the couch beside her purse. I did not touch it. I only saw the preview. Carolina Beach Unit CMA updated. If she signs, we can go live fast. The room seemed to narrow. They had not come because they were worried. They had come because they had already discussed selling my condo before I even finished unpacking it. Graham kept talking, using the voice people use when they want control to sound like kindness. "You do not need to make decisions by yourself. You do not have kids to think about. My family has more moving parts. Let us help." My family, as if I had become something outside that word. I could have yelled. I could have demanded the keys back. I could have told Paige to unlock my door and get out of my home. But 15 years of watching families destroy each other over wills had taught me something useful. The loudest person in the room usually thinks they're winning. The quiet one is often the one building the record. So I looked at Graham's jacket pocket and said, "Okay." That surprised them. Paige blinked first. Graham studied my face like he was waiting for the fight he'd rehearsed. "We will call tonight," he said. "We can talk like family." They left with my keys. I waited until the elevator doors closed before I moved. Then I locked the deadbolt with the spare key I kept taped inside the back of the kitchen drawer. My hand shook so badly, I had to set my coffee on the counter. I wanted to call Graham and scream until my throat hurt. I wanted to ask him who he thought he was, walking into the first peaceful place I had owned in years and taking the keys like I was a child. Instead, I got my notebook. I wrote the date, the time. Graham and Paige entered without calling from the lobby. Paige locked the door. Graham took my keys. Paige received a message from Reed about the CMA. Graham said temporary place. Then I called Luis Ortega, the concierge and security supervisor at Seabright Landing. He listened without interrupting. "I need the lobby footage saved," I told him, "and I need the visitor code deactivated." Luis said he would enter an incident note, preserve the camera footage, and make sure no guest came up without direct confirmation from me. After I hung up, I opened Graham's contact. For a moment, I stared at the old photo attached to his name. He was younger in it, laughing at a 4th of July cookout in Dad's backyard. Back then, I still thought family meant the people who would know where the spare key was and never use it against you. I typed one sentence: "Look inside Dad's lockbox." I sent it. Graham called 4 minutes later. I let it ring. The first voicemail came almost immediately. He sounded casual, too casual, saying he had no idea what lockbox I meant and that I was making this weird. The second came 11 minutes later. "Paige thinks you are trying to mess with our heads," he said. "This is not healthy, Marin." The third came after noon. His voice was different then, lower, tighter. "If that envelope is still in there, do not open it before I get there. You do not understand the whole story." I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. I had never told Graham there was an envelope in Dad's lockbox. For a long time, I did not move. Then I walked to the bedroom closet and took down the cedar box. It was heavier than I remembered. The brass corners had darkened with age. When I set it on the dining table, the smell of cedar rose into the room like a memory I wasn't ready for. I did not open it. I sat across from it all night with my notebook, my phone, and the spare key beside me. By then, I understood one thing. Graham did not just want my condo, he was afraid of what Dad had left behind. I did not open the box that night because fear has a way of making even a small brass latch feel like a loaded question. Instead, I sat at my dining table until the first gray line of morning showed over the balcony rail, and I thought about the 16 months that had taught me how to stay awake when everyone else had reasons to leave. My mother, Miriam Whitlock, had been 71 when hospice came into the house on Maple Hollow Drive. Before that, she had been an elementary school teacher who kept thank you notes from former students in a tin above the refrigerator. Even after she got sick, she still asked about other people first. Had I eaten? Had Graham called? Was the neighbor's dog still limping? I asked Bell and Rowe Estate Law if I could shift to hybrid work. Tamsin Bell approved it before I finished explaining, so I moved my laptop into the dining room and made that old house my office, my mother's care station, and eventually the place where I learned how long a person can function on coffee and duty. During the day, I drafted probate filings and reviewed estate inventories. At night, I argued with insurance representatives, checked medication times on a yellow legal pad, and called Teresa Nguyen, Mom's hospice nurse, when Mom spiked a fever at 2 a.m. "You did the right thing calling," Teresa told me once, her voice calm through the phone. I remember gripping the receiver and staring at the kitchen clock. I never know anymore, I told her. You know more than you think, she said. Graham did not know those things. He did not know which pharmacy still had Mom's nausea medication when the first two were out. He did not know the soup she could keep down if I blended it twice. He did not know that Dad's old recliner became my bed because Mom got anxious if she woke and could not see me. He was legally my brother. Silas and Miriam adopted him when he was 9, when I was 5. For years, I adored him with the uncomplicated loyalty of a little sister. He taught me to ride a bike in the driveway and told me not to cry when I scraped both knees. My parents worked hard to make sure he never felt like a guest in our family. Maybe that was why I made excuses for him longer than I should have. He came by a few times during Mom's illness, always rushed, always with a reason. Sales trip, kids had soccer, Paige had something on the calendar. Once, he stood in the doorway of Mom's room for 12 minutes, checking his phone twice, then kissed her forehead and said he would come back next weekend. He did not. Paige rarely came past the hall. She would bring a candle or a card, then wait in the car with the engine running. Her mother, Claudia Mercer, mailed sympathy cards with embossed flowers and never once asked what we actually needed. I still sent Graham texts. Mom asked if you can come Sunday. His replies became their own sad little pattern. Kids have soccer. Work is crazy. Maybe next weekend. I saved them without meaning to. They sat in my phone like small, ordinary proof. Dad died first, at the end of November 2024. Heart attack. Sudden enough that I spent the first hour after the call walking from room to room with his wallet in my hand because I did not know what else to hold. I dealt with the funeral home, called Coastal Carolina Credit Union, found the insurance papers, and sat beside Mom while she looked through old photos of him because she was too weak to stand at the service as long as she wanted. Graham cried at the funeral. Real tears, I think. But later, in the kitchen, he asked about Dad's truck, then the savings account, then the house. Where did Dad keep that cedar box from his office? He asked. In the office, I answered. He nodded too quickly. Right, just wondered. When Mom died in July 2025, the house felt like it had exhaled and emptied itself. After her service, Claudia hugged me for a second too long. Sweetheart, did your mother leave any instructions about her jewelry? The question landed wrong, but I was too tired to name why. I pulled back and told her I had not gone through everything yet. That same afternoon, I saw Graham coming out of the hallway near Dad's office. Bathroom, he said before I asked. There was a bathroom beside the kitchen. He knew that, I knew that, but grief makes strange things look ordinary, and I let it pass. The will was read at Bell and Row a few weeks later. Tamsin sat at the conference table in her navy suit, her silver hair clipped at the back of her neck, and read everything in the same steady voice she used for difficult clients. I received the house on Maple Hollow Drive and certain personal contents. Graham received 60% of the remaining cash assets, including most of the savings, a small brokerage account, and Dad's truck. I received the other 40%. Then Tamsin read the codicil, signed and notarized in August 2024. It stated that the house was left to me in recognition of my role as primary caregiver for both Silas and Miriam Whitlock during their final stage of life. Graham stared at the table. Tamsin did the talking. No one is saying Marin didn't help, but a house is different. Graham has 2 kids. Marin is more flexible. Tamsin looked up from the document. Flexible is not a legal category. Paige smiled tightly. I just mean there should be a family conversation before this becomes cold. The will is clear, I said. Graham finally looked at me. You always make everything sound like paperwork. I almost told him that paperwork was what kept families from rewriting the truth after someone died. Instead, I signed where Tamsin pointed. I tried living in the Maple Hollow house after Mom was gone. I lasted until October. Every room had a memory with a task attached to it. The hallway where I folded hospice supply boxes, the kitchen where I learned to eat standing up, The den where Mom's chair faced a television she stopped watching. So I sold it for $468,000 after the contract came in clean. I told Graham after it was signed because I knew he would try to stop me before. You sold our parents' house without asking me? It is my house under the will. His voice softened in that careful way I had started to distrust. I just want things to be fair, Marin. By then, I knew fair meant he wanted another chance to measure what I had against what he wanted. The morning after he took my condo keys, I drove back to Raleigh with his voicemails saved on my phone and my notebook in my bag. Tamsin listened without interrupting. She read the incident note Lewis had emailed from Seabright Landing. She paused at the voicemail about the envelope and played it again. Did you respond to any of this? No. Good. Don't argue. Document. She folded her hands on the desk. If he comes back or tries to enter again, we can discuss a police non-emergency report. For now, preserve access records, change codes, keep every message, and do not meet him alone. After that, I went to Coastal Carolina Credit Union. The safe deposit box smelled like cold metal and old paper. Inside were certified copies of the will and codicil, a folder of asset notes, and a caregiver ledger in Dad's handwriting. Back at Tamsin's office, she showed me something I had not seen before, an attorney memo from August 2024. Your father came in alone, she said. He wanted a record. The memo stated that Silas Whitlock was of sound mind, that Miriam had participated in discussions while lucid, that I had not pressured either of them, and that leaving me the house was intentional. It also noted that Graham had asked more than once whether the house should be reconsidered because I did not have a family of my own. I read that line twice. Tamsin's voice softened. Your father saw this coming. I left the credit union with the folder on the passenger seat and both hands tight on the steering wheel. If Graham wanted to tell the world I had taken more than my share, Dad had already left behind the answer. By the time I drove back to Carolina Beach, Graham had stopped sounding confused and started sounding offended. The first message came while I was crossing the bridge toward the coast. You are letting Tamsin divide this family, Marin. Dad would hate this. The second arrived before I pulled into Seabright Landing. Paige is only trying to help. You are taking this so personally because you are still grieving. The third came that evening after I had changed the visitor code with Luis. I am your brother. I have a right to know what is happening with property that came from our parents. I saved every voicemail. I wrote down the time, the subject, the tone. I did not answer. There was something almost humiliating about sitting at my countertop making a neat record of my own brother trying to corner me. But the habit steadied me. Paper had weight. Dates had weight. Words had weight when people later tried to pretend they had never said them. At 8:46 that night, Paige added me to a group chat called Whitlock Family Check-In. Graham was in it, Paige, Claudia Mercer, Reed Mercer, two cousins I barely spoke to anymore, though they mostly watched from the edges. Paige started gently. We need a calm family conversation before this becomes something none of us can take back. Claudia followed a minute later. Your mother would want peace, sweetheart. Miriam was never a woman who liked division. Graham typed, I am not asking for everything. I'm asking for fairness. Then Reed entered like he'd been waiting for his cue. Carolina Beach is moving fast right now. Holding property through the wrong season can cost real money. No pressure, just facts. No pressure. That was how people applied it when they wanted to sound clean. Paige added, grief can make financial decisions feel clearer than they are. I stared at that sentence for a long time, not because it was clever, because it was the first time I saw the shape of what they were building. They weren't just saying I was selfish, they were saying I was unstable. I screenshotted every message and sent them to Tamsin. Her reply came back almost immediately. Let them keep typing. The next morning, Claudia arrived with a casserole in a glass dish covered in foil. Luis called up first this time. There is a Claudia Mercer in the lobby. She says she is family. I did not buzz her up. A resident let her in anyway, an older woman who probably thought she was being kind. Luis noted it in the visitor log. Claudia appeared at my door 10 minutes later, smiling like we were about to pray together. "Marin, sweetheart," she said. "I brought chicken and rice. You look like someone who forgets to eat." I kept one hand on the door and did not step back far enough to invite her in. "That is kind of you. I'm not having visitors today." Her smile tightened, but only for a second. "You do not have to be strong every minute. Graham has children. He is trying to keep his family stable. A woman living alone sometimes does not realize when she is isolating herself." I looked at the covered dish in her hands. "Claudia, I'm not discussing my home with you." She sighed like I had disappointed her. Before lawyers got involved, this could have been healed. She left the casserole on the floor beside the door. Under the foil was a folded note. "Call your brother before lawyers make this worse." I photographed it before throwing the casserole away. That afternoon, I met Etta Roswell in the elevator. She lived on the third floor and had the kind of posture that made a cardigan look formal. 73, white hair cut sharp at her jaw, eyes that missed very little. "You are Marin Whitlock," she said. "I am. I spent 34 years as a court reporter. I know when someone is laying groundwork." I did not know what to say to that. She continued. "Claudia Mercer spoke to Alma Decker this morning, then to 2 women near the mailboxes. She told her you were not yourself since losing your parents, and that your brother was only trying to protect you from being influenced." The elevator hummed down one floor. Etta looked at me. People who are truly worried do not usually start by recruiting witnesses. The doors opened. She stepped out, then turned back. "Keep your records, dear, and do not let them make you explain your sanity to strangers." By Friday, Reed made his move in writing. The email's subject read, "Preliminary Market Snapshot, Carolina Beach Unit." He attached a CMA, comparable sales, a market timing note, and a line about potential buyer interest. His tone was polished, almost friendly. If Marin wants to explore options, Mercer Shoreline Realty can prepare the paperwork quickly. I had never asked him for anything. Tamsin told me not to respond. "This is useful," she said over the phone. "He's acting like he's providing information, but the context matters. Family pressure, no written authorization, and a property owner who has already told them to stop." The next incident came 2 days later. Luis called while I was working through a client inventory report. "Marin, your brother is here with a locksmith." My whole body went cold. I took the elevator down but stayed behind the lobby glass where Luis could see me. Graham stood near the front desk with Evan Rowe, a locksmith holding a tool bag and a clipboard. "My sister lost her keys," Graham told Luis. "I am her family contact." Luis asked for proof of ownership or written authorization from me. Graham's face hardened. "She is not thinking clearly right now." Evan looked between them, then closed his clipboard. "Without authorization from the unit owner, I cannot touch the lock." Luis wrote the incident report before Graham left the building. "If he comes back again," Luis told me afterward, "we can issue a building trespass warning. You may also want to consider a police non-emergency report if your attorney agrees." I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Graham had stood in my lobby and tried to turn concern into access. The campaign reached my office the following Monday. Jillian Price came to my desk with an expression I knew from client emergencies. "We got an anonymous voicemail about you." The message said a Bell and Rowe employee had serious family instability and maybe should not be handling estate files. Marcus Leary called me into his office. He was careful, not cruel. "Is anything affecting your client work, Marin?" "No," I told him, "but someone in my family wants people to believe it is." Tamsin joined us and explained the situation with the calm of a woman who had watched uglier families implode over smaller estates. Marcus listened, then nodded. "Your work stands for itself," he said. "Keep me informed if this reaches the firm again." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt exposed. That night, Reed sent a screenshot into the group chat and deleted it almost instantly. I captured it first. It was a note, probably meant for Paige. If she gets emotional at the HOA reception, Graham can present himself as her emergency family contact and push for a family-led conversation. I sent it to Tamsin. Her call came less than a minute later. No more private meetings. If they want an audience, we will make sure there are witnesses. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of Mom's old reading chair and thought about Graham at 16, running beside my bike on Maple Hollow Drive, one hand on the seat until I found my balance. The worst part wasn't that he wanted money. It was that someone who once helped me stay upright was now trying to prove I couldn't stand on my own. I printed everything the next morning: keys, security, family chat, CMA, workplace call, caregiver receipts. The folders lined up across my table like chapters in a story I hadn't wanted to tell. My phone buzzed. Etta had texted, "Sit with me at the HOA reception. People should meet you before they meet the version of you Claudia is selling." I looked at the folders, then at the front door. Graham no longer had a code to open. For the first time since moving in, I decided I wouldn't hide from my own building. The lockbox waited for me on the dining table, like it had been placed there by someone else. I had walked around it for days, moving folders, making coffee, answering work emails, pretending I was not aware of the smell of cedar every time the air shifted. Dad had built that box in 2004. I remembered the year because he had been replacing shelves in the garage and let me sand a scrap piece of wood while he worked. He told me cedar kept things safe from rot and moths. At the time, I thought he meant old photographs and cufflinks. I did not know he meant truth. That evening, I sat down, placed both hands flat on the table, and opened it. The hinges gave a soft complaint. Inside was Dad's old watch with the cracked leather band, his wedding ring, a photograph of me at 7 standing in front of the Maple Hollow Drive house with my front teeth missing, and a folder labeled Caregiver Records in Dad's careful block handwriting. Beneath it was a copy of the codicil folded once. Under that sat a letter with my name on it. My fingers stopped over the envelope. For a moment, I heard Graham's voicemail again. "If that envelope is still in there, do not open it before I get there." I opened it anyway. Dad's handwriting had always leaned slightly to the right, as if even his letters were trying to keep moving. The first line made my throat close. "Marin, if you are reading this, someone has made you feel guilty for keeping what your mother and I chose to leave you." I pressed my mouth over and kept reading. He wrote that he and Mom had seen everything: the nights on the recliner, the yellow legal pad, the calls to Teresa Nguyen when Mom's fever rose, the way I kept the house running while grief had not yet become grief because there was still too much work to do. He wrote that Graham had been given more of the cash assets because Graham had always worried about security and because he and Paige had children. But the house was left to me because I had protected it when it was not worth anything to anyone but the people inside it. Near the bottom, he wrote the sentence I would later memorize without meaning to. "A home does not belong to the loudest voice in the family. It belongs to the person who protected it when everyone else had reasons to leave." I cried then, but not the way I had cried after the funerals. This was quieter, less like breaking, more like finally being seen by someone who was no longer in the room. When I lifted the folder, I saw the mark. There was an empty rectangle in the dust, the size of a smaller envelope. The cedar beneath it was cleaner, lighter. Something had been there long enough to leave an outline, and now it was gone. I remembered Graham stepping out of Dad's office after Mom's funeral. "Bathroom," he had said too quickly. I called Tamsin. "Did you open it?" she asked. "Yes. Are you sitting down?" I looked at the empty space in the box. "I am now." "Your father left a sealed copy with the firm," she said. "He told me if anything from the house disappeared, I should keep our copy in the file." My skin went cold. He knew. "He suspected," Tamsin said. "That is different, but sometimes it is enough." The next morning, I drove back to Raleigh. Tamsin met me in a small conference room with coffee I did not drink and a slim folder she handled like it had weight beyond paper. The missing envelope, or its copy, was not dramatic. No hidden account, no secret confession, just 3 pages of Dad's statement, signed, dated, witnessed by Tamsin. Graham had asked him more than once to reconsider the house. Paige had told Dad it was unfair for a woman without children to receive the family home. Dad had refused. He wrote that Mom agreed, that both of them understood exactly what they were doing, and that if Graham challenged it later, this statement should be used to confirm their intent. Tamsin slid the pages toward me. Your father was not trying to punish Graham. He was trying to prevent him from rewriting your role after he was gone. I touched the paper but did not pick it up right away. He never told me. Parents do not always tell us the ways they are trying to protect us. Back at the condo, I opened the caregiver records folder. It was worse and better than I expected. Scans of the yellow legal pad, medication schedules, hospice invoices, funeral receipts, my obituary draft for Mom with coffee stains on the corner, printed text messages where I had asked Graham to visit, and he had said the kids had soccer, work was crazy, maybe next weekend. I used to think those papers were proof that the hardest part of my life had really happened. Now they were proof that I had stayed. Tamsin called Teresa Nguyen that afternoon. Teresa agreed to sign a statement. It was short and factual. I had been Miriam's primary caregiver. Graham had rarely been present during hospice visits. Miriam had once told Teresa she worried I would be pressured after she was gone. Miriam was lucid when she spoke about wanting me to be protected. When Tamsin read the draft aloud over the phone, I closed my eyes. That helps, she said. It hurts, too, I admitted. Most useful things do. Tamsin also prepared a draft notice for Patrick Shaw, the broker in charge at Mercer Shoreline Realty. She did not send it yet. Reed had already put himself too close to the property without a listing agreement, but Tamsin wanted to see whether he would step back or keep talking. Let him choose his own problem, she said. Etta helped with the social side. She stopped me by the mailboxes and told me Mrs. Elma Decker was willing to confirm that Claudia had been asking residents whether I seemed stable. Elma does not like being used, Etta said. Neither do I. By Friday, my dining table had become a map of everything I had not wanted to face. The codicil, Dad's letter, the missing envelope copy, Teresa's statement, Luis's incident reports, Reed's market email, screenshots from the group chat, Claudia's note from under the casserole foil. For one tired hour, I considered surrender. I could sell the condo. I could send Graham more money. I could make the calls stop. Maybe Paige would stop describing my grief like a medical condition. Maybe Claudia would stop smiling at strangers and telling them I needed guidance. Then I found the small cloth pouch tucked inside the lining of the lockbox. There was a folded note from Mom. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are the last door you are allowed to lock. I read it 3 times. Then I called Tamsin. We prepared 4 envelopes, she told me later. Copies only. The originals stay with us. Graham's held the codicil, Dad's statement, his voicemails, the security summary, and Dad's letter. Paige's held the group chat, Reed's market note, and her lines about grief clouding my judgment. Claudia's held witness notes from Etta and Alma, plus a boundary warning. Reed's held the no authorization notice, his market email, and the broker notice Tamsin had not yet sent. The HOA welcome reception was that evening in the community room. I wore a navy sweater and flat shoes because I did not trust my knees in heels. Etta met me near the elevator. You can sit with me, she said. Tamsin arrived 10 minutes later, calm in a gray blazer carrying a leather folder. Luis stood at the concierge desk watching the lobby doors. My phone buzzed just before we entered. Luis had texted, 4 visitors just arrived. Graham, Paige, Claudia, Reed. Claudia says they are family support. Tamsin looked at me. Do you want to leave? I looked through the glass at the room full of residents, at Etta waiting beside me, at the 4 envelopes in Tamsin's hand. No, I said. I want witnesses. Then I stepped into the community room. The room smelled like coffee, lemon cookies, and the ocean air people carried in on their jackets. For a few seconds, everything looked ordinary. Harriet Boone was arranging name tags near the refreshment table. Etta Roswell sat at a round table by the window and lifted one hand when she saw me. Tamsin Bell took a seat 2 tables away, her leather folder resting neatly in front of her. Through the glass wall, I could see Louise at the concierge desk, watching the lobby doors. I had barely reached Etta when Claudia Mercer crossed the room with Paige beside her. Graham followed, shoulders tight, and Reed trailed behind them with the expression of a man who had already decided this was business. Claudia smiled wide enough for the nearby residents to notice. "Marin, sweetheart, you do not need to avoid your family," she said. "We are only here because Graham is trying to help you." Several people turned. Paige touched Graham's arm and looked at me with wet eyes she had produced on command. "She will not sit down with us," Paige said. "She has let a lawyer turn a family matter into something legal." Graham looked around the room as if he wanted witnesses, then gave them exactly the version he had rehearsed. "She sold our parents' house, bought this place, and now acts like I'm greedy for asking what is fair." Reed stepped in with a quieter voice. A sale could solve this without more conflict. That was the moment I understood their mistake. They thought a room full of strangers would make me shrink. They did not understand that strangers had no reason to protect their lies. I stood slowly. My knees felt weak, but my hands were steady. "You said you wanted clarity. I brought copies." Tamsin rose before anyone could interrupt. "I represent Marin Whitlock," she said. "From this point forward, any communication about her property goes through my office." She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. I handed the first envelope to Graham, the second to Paige, the third to Claudia, and the fourth to Reed. Paper sounded louder than it should have as they opened them. Graham looked annoyed at first. Then he saw Dad's handwriting. His face changed before he said a word. He read the codicil, then the attorney memo, then the transcript of his voicemail. Finally, he reached Dad's letter. His mouth pressed into a hard line, and the red crept up his neck. He read one line under his breath, but the room was quiet enough that I heard it. Graham was given money because he asked for security. Marin was given the house because she gave us her time, her sleep, and her life when we had nothing left to give back. No one moved. Paige reached for the letter, but Graham pulled it back. That was when she lost her softness. "Your father wrote that before she sold the house and bought herself a beach condo." The room shifted. Not loudly, just enough. People understood then. This had never been about my grief. It had been about the condo. Tamsin placed Paige's copies on the table in front of her. Screenshots from the group chat, Reed's market note, Paige's message about grief clouding my judgment, the deleted note about Graham presenting himself as my emergency family contact at the reception. Paige looked at the pages, then at the people watching her. "We were worried about her," she said. Etta folded her hands on the table. "Concern does not usually come with a market analysis." Paige's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Claudia opened her envelope next. Her smile faded when she saw witness notes from Etta and Alma Decker, along with the boundary warning Tamsin had prepared. "I was asking after her. I am a mother. I know when a family needs help." Harriet Boone stepped closer. "Lewis, do we have visitor records related to this matter?" Lewis came to the doorway of the community room. His voice was calm and professional. Miss Mercer was not on Marin's visitor list when she entered the building. Before that, Graham and Paige used Marin's visitor code without lobby confirmation. Graham later returned with a locksmith and no written authorization from the unit owner. He stopped there. No accusation, just facts. Claudia's face tightened. For the first time since I had met her, she looked smaller than her cardigan and pearls. Reed opened his envelope next. He skimmed the no authorization notice and the draft broker letter with increasing speed. "I was only providing market information," he said. Tamsin looked at him. "Then provide it to people who ask for it." Reed closed the folder and said nothing else. Graham was still staring at Dad's letter. When he finally looked at me, his voice had lost his public tone. "You always act like you were the only one there." I did not answer quickly. I wanted to be careful with the truth even then. "No," I said. "I was just the one who did not leave." That reached him. I saw it land. Not enough to fix him, not enough to undo what he had done, but enough that he stopped arguing. He folded Dad's letter carefully and put it inside his jacket, not the pocket where he had once put my keys, but close. I turned to Harriet. "I would like the HOA to keep a copy of the incident report about my visitor access." "Of course," Harriet said. "Louis and I will update the guest policy by Monday." Reed left first. Claudia followed with her chin raised, though no one looked at her the way they had before. Paige tugged Graham's sleeve, but he did not move until she said his name twice. When he finally walked out, he did it silently. No one applauded. No one cheered. Harriet simply looked toward the refreshment table and said the coffee was still warm. That was how it ended. Not with a dramatic explosion, but with the air clearing. In the 31 days that followed, Tamsin sent the formal cease and desist letters by certified mail. Graham's attorney contacted her and confirmed he would not reach out to me directly about the condo again. Tamsin sent the notice to Patrick Shaw at Mercer Shoreline Realty because Reed had still tried to discuss a sale at the reception. Patrick responded that Reed would not contact me about my property without written authorization. Reed received an internal warning, not a ruined career, which felt more real and somehow more satisfying. The HOA changed the visitor code policy. Codes expired after 24 hours. Guests had to be confirmed before going upstairs. Louise kept the incident report in the building file. Claudia sent a card that said she only wanted peace. I read it once and filed it away. Paige unfollowed me and deleted a few Carolina Beach posts. Graham sent one email. I read Dad's letter again. "I am not asking about the condo anymore." I saved it in a folder labeled Family, Graham. I did not answer. Not because I hated him, because silence can be a boundary too. Work steadied. Marcus Leary told me Bell and Rowe had no concerns about my files. Jillian Price leaned over my desk later and said, "Funny how people question a woman's judgment right when she stops giving them what they want." I laughed for the first time in weeks. One quiet morning, I opened Dad's cedar lockbox again. Beneath the lining, I found a small velvet pouch. Inside was Mom's silver locket. In it was a photo of me as a child, standing between Silas and Miriam in front of the Maple Hollow house. A folded note was tucked behind it. "We saw what you gave. Do not let them make you forget." I put the locket on and walked out to the balcony. No Graham at the door, no group chat lighting up my phone, no Claudia calling me fragile, no Reed sending market estimates. Just the wind off Carolina Beach, the open lockbox on my table, and my keys in my hand. Graham thought taking my keys meant taking control. He was wrong. What kept my home mine was the will, the codicil, the records, the witnesses, and the line I finally stopped apologizing for drawing. If you have ever been the one who stayed, the one who handled the hard parts, or the one told to be reasonable after everyone else took what they wanted, I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done. And if stories about quiet revenge, family drama, karma, and people reclaiming their lives speak to you, stay with this channel. There are more stories ahead.